Welcome to Almost Productive, a podcast mostly about marketing.
I'm Sean.
I'm Julie. I'm Addie.
And I'm Ben. And we're all marketing professionals at New Boston Creative Group in Manhattan, Kansas. Generative AI models like ChatGPT have been heralded by some zealous believers as the solution to all of humanity's woes, while others claim they're omens of the robot apocalypse looming on the horizon. Although those extremes are compelling stories, they don't have to be the only ones we tell. With deep learning models taking the world by storm, is it possible to be pro-human and pro-worker without being anti-technology? Today we're going to talk a bit about how ChatGPT works, its strengths and weaknesses, and what it may mean for the ever-evolving mechanisms of marketing. But first, here's a message from our sponsor. Statistically, there's at least one lazy freeloader in your home right now, devouring your food, sullying your furniture, and even thieving the water straight out of your toilet. That's right, your dog could be robbing you of thousands of dollars each year. Sure, Wendell the Corgi might be cute, but can you really say that the little parasite is living up to his financial potential? Well, now you can. From the minds that brought you the Meow Monetizer, we present the Hustle Muzzle. With our patented pet technology, the Hustle Muzzle ensures your dog has no choice but to adapt to a goal-oriented, task-driven lifestyle. Don't believe us? Let's hear from some of our satisfied customers.
Before Hustle Muzzle, my St. Bernard, Max, never paid his share of the rent. Now that he's working 50 hours a week at the meat processing plant, the fluffy deadbeat has finally started to learn the value of a hard day's work.
Our Chihuahua never once picked up the bill for dinner. But now with Hustle Muzzle, Sadie's driving day and night for Uber and DoorDash to pay me back for all those years of mooching meals. With interest, of course.
My Australian Shepherd was always an active dog, but it never felt like he was doing enough for my ROI. Now with Hustle Muzzle, that bum has finally traded enough crypto to pay for his vent bills. What's that, Milo? You won't have enough for your heartworm medication this month? Sounds like a personal problem.
For your own Hustle Muzzle, call 1-800-GOOD-BOY. That's 1-800-GOODBOY. And if you call now, you'll get a 1-week free subscription to our Guinea Pig Fluencer online course. The perfect way to get even your littlest pets creating some passive income. The Hustle Muzzle. Sure, they may be man's best friend, but who says they can't also be man's best investment? So on today's episode of Almost Productive, we're talking about AI. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, the technology, and our thoughts on it, I had a fun question for you all, which is, if you could automate one part of your life, what would it be and why? Would you pick something more like chores? Would you want to remove idle time, stuff that's boring but not productive, something else? What would you automate?
Yeah, when I thought about this, my first thought was chores. Like, let's get an AI robot to like do my dishes and do the laundry. Like, just knock that stuff out. That is just too tedious on a day-to-day basis.
Raking the yard for me. So many pine needles.
Great. That's a great answer.
My first thought was actually work. Like, if there was an AI that was as fully developed as some people think that it currently is, which is not, could it just do my job and I could still get a paycheck? That would be incredible. But as I'm sure we'll discuss in this episode, the technology is definitely not there yet. So my dream will have to wait a little bit longer.
I was on the same page as basically all of y'all. I think the best things to automate are the things that need to be like consistently maintained, like yard work and laundry and dishes and work, going to work. There's always something new coming. I think sometimes it's like some people want like a one and done thing, and I just don't agree. I want the thing. I don't want to think. I'm with you. Like, yard work sounds good. I kind of like mowing the lawn personally, but if I knew that somebody else was taking care of it, I probably would never do it again, if I'm being honest, if I knew it was always going to be maintained. Same with laundry. Laundry never is over. It is constantly going through cycles and cycles. And I'm like, I'd rather someone take care of it.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. Addie was the only one who picked a more complicated task. Because I think most people are like, yeah, what are the repetitive, easy things? And she jumped immediately to like, yeah, it can do my entire job, which led me to think about, well, if we're going to go there, maybe it could just like raise my kids. Like, We'll just have a robot AI nanny and it can do that. And it would probably be a lot better than me, to be honest with you. It would know more. It could help them with their homework a lot better. Any science fair projects it would kill. Compared to me, I'm just getting in the way from that, I think.
The homework and school angle is true, but it would lack the human touch and like the of their actual father who cares about them.
I disagree.
With the AI in this...
I think, it's been trained on how many How to Be a Father books. And so it's probably a lot better. It probably knows exactly what to say when they come home and they've been bullied. They could probably go to the school and, scare the bully because they're a robot. Like,
because they're terrifying.
Right. And I hate conflict. So I think it's going to be a lot better all around. Even if it doesn't technically feel love, the kid will probably, feel like it does. And that's good enough.
Right. Okay. All right. I'm on board.
I think those are all great and terrible things to automate. I'm glad we really encapsulated the range because I think there is a lot of range to explore. So I just wanted to start with this disclaimer. Our coworker, Ken, who is on the web team with Sean, wrote this great article for our blog back in July. And he had a disclaimer that he wrote for the article that I thought would work really well for this episode as well. So to paraphrase, this episode is being recorded in early 2024. The field of AI, its manifestations and corporate reactions to them are changing quickly enough that this can only be a snapshot of this particular moment. There's no telling when circumstances will change enough to make any or all of this obsolete, but at the rate they're evolving, it will be, relatively speaking, soon. And despite his disclaimer, I highly recommend reading that blog because so much of what he's talking about, I think, was relevant to how I was thinking about AI into forming this episode. We will for sure have a link to that in the show notes so that you can read it. So just to start, we're talking strictly about ChatGPT today. It's the focus. We might diverge a little bit, but ultimately that's going to be where we start because I think it's one of the most common and it's the easiest to get into without getting into the nitty gritty too quickly. So just for starters, according to Amanda Hetler, senior editor of TechTarget.com, ChatGPT is an artificial intelligence or AI chatbot that uses natural language processing to create human-like conversational dialogue. So we've used other natural language processing programs for years before ChatGPT, but basically what makes ChatGPT different and stand out is the complexity of the content that ChatGPT is able to produce and the nearly instantaneous speed at which it produces it. It has billions of machine parameters that it uses, and the vast amounts of online text used to train the model are up to, according to the BBC Science Focus magazine, a whopping 570 gigabytes of data, which doesn't sound a lot when you're talking about text. 570 gigabytes sounds pretty small. But according to the article, that is over 300 billion words. And I don't always think humans are great at managing large numbers in general, so I wanted to break that down even further. A little over 1 million words is the length of the entire Harry Potter series, all 7 books, a little over 1 million. So if you took the stack of Harry Potter series and multiplied it by 300,000, we'd have around the right amount of words that are going into this system. So a lot of work, a lot of effort around the back end went into it to make it work. But like I said before, ChatGPT is not the only AI model out there, let alone the one that uses natural language processing. And so I was curious for you all, how have you all used AI in your daily lives? Because it's kind of everywhere, especially NLP, natural language processing.
I think the biggest one for me is predictive text. So whether that's in a text message or writing an email, it's kind of crazy how well my algorithms have gotten to know me. Like, it knows I say amazing and fantastic and lovely and, adjectives like that. So they suggest those kinds of words when I'm writing an email versus, other adjectives that other authors or writers might be using. So it's been kind of interesting to see, one, how quickly things learn and adapt to your language du jour, and then 2, kind of how spot on it is. So whether I'm communicating with a New Boston creative group, I've noticed that even those predictive texts are slightly different. They're a little more informal than when maybe I'm messaging with someone outside of New Boston creative group. So like a client, the predictive text becomes a little more formal. So it's, fascinating.
I always find when you go to a search engine and you start typing, and then it gives you an autofill of what it thinks the question or options of the question that you're asking will be. And that's come a long way because years ago, I started typing the word why, WHY, and one of the first options was why women kill. And I was like, I don't think this is right. Oh,
Did you ever find out the answer or?
no, I didn't, because that is not, I want to be very clear, that is not the information that I was after at that particular time.
Yeah, I think as far as like daily, I think it's the same for me. Like the predictive text when you're texting someone or you're using chat and it'll autocomplete or do a response for you automatically. I have noticed in email it started to do that as well, include multiple words or phrases when I'm typing in an email. So those are probably the most frequent ones I do on daily. And then for others, it's been playing around just with all the other AI tools with the ChatGPT and image creation, video creation, song creation, here and there.
Something that has really surprised me in the research, but shouldn't be that surprising, especially because we work involving with like marketing and design, is that a lot of the AI that has existed for a long time exists in a way that it's not supposed to be noticed. Like it kind of exists in the background. It supports different systems.
I think that's a really interesting point too, because if you were to ask most people how they use AI in their daily lives, I don't know that the connection is always made that predictive text and Google search fill-ins are AI. So AI can kind of get a bad rap because people think that it's like this big and scary, terrifying new technology, when really it's been integrated into our daily lives for the last 10 years, maybe more than that.
I think too, the only one that we didn't come up with that I found in my list that's probably pretty common is like online customer service chatbots, which are good for like, yeah, they have varying levels of quality. Some are really quick and will answer your question, but if you did want to talk to a person, they are endlessly infuriating. And so there's a balance there for sure. But that has become pretty normalized too. If you're going to go to the website, they're going to have an automated chat feature in addition to calling a person. And usually that's the thing you see first before they connect you with a human employee, just to kind of weed out any easier questions that their clients might have. And I think that's interesting too. It's like, it's there, but it's not making a big deal of itself on those sites either.
The one last one that is probably good to mention, even though we didn't bring it up because we must not use it, is things like Siri and Amazon and Google on your phones, where you can talk to them and ask them to do thing. And that is sort of like your phone assistant. It's just been very rudimentary and not that great as compared to the sort of leap forward that ChatGPT made.
What are the strengths, do you guys see, of ChatGPT?
Well, one of the things I think is it's fast. It is so fast. And at first blush, what it churns out seems pretty legit.
Yeah, I would echo that it is very fast for what it's trying to do, and it is very capable in that you can ask it to do just about anything, and that you will get a competent answer for just about any query you have, especially with the newest versions, and also if you are paying for ChatGPT, which has the ability to do a web search as well as other features. So you can really ask it anything, and if it's not in its data set, it can actually go and find the answer. So it makes it a lot more capable for doing just about anything that you want it to do, which is, yeah, both its benefit and its sort of the scary nature of it.
I would add accessibility also, since it is free and very user-friendly. It's a very clean slate. It's not a lot of flash or buttons or anything. So if people have never used it before, I think it's very easy to kind of dip your toe and experiment with it.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, all you need to do is set up an account and you can be using ChatGPT 3.5 pretty much immediately. You have to pay for 4.
Yeah, and to sort of piggyback on what Addie said with the accessibility, because it is just like text box that you type into, there's no confusion on like, what do I click? You just keep typing to it and you just keep having a conversation with everybody knows how to do, like, or even if you can't form, you don't know like technically like what you're asking for, like it's really good at intuiting. Like you ask it a question, it gives you a response and you go, no, that's not what I wanted. I want it more like this. It can then do that and continue the conversation, which was like a big major breakthrough that you wouldn't have to just start over. Like it'll just keep iterating with you and with your question through this whole conversation, and you can finally get to what you want just by continuing to ask it other questions.
Yeah, when you think about a search engine itself, if you don't get the search query right, you don't see the results you want, you've got to start over. And with, like you said, Sean, ChatGPT, you can just keep going. You can tell it, no, that's not right. I'm after this, and it, refine what you're after.
The user interface is really good. I would agree. And it makes it very accessible for people to use. What are the weaknesses of ChatGPT? What have we noticed or what have you read about ChatGPT? Where do you see it not being as strong of a tool?
Well, if you didn't catch my foreshadowing before, I said the results at first blush seem legit. So I actually used it once and said, give me some words related to agriculture that start with a T. And wouldn't you know it, a lot of the words did not start with the letter T. And that was probably about as simple a request as you could get. So I feel like there are a lot of errors in it. It's prone to errors. It sounds good, but it's not always right. And sometimes the language is very stilted. And it's like, that's not what we're after. And you can feed it. That's one of the cases where you can go back and say, no, make it sound more casual or something in the style of this, and it can refine it. But yeah, a lot of the times what it turns out sounds awkward too.
The way that it is trained is to be helpful, and it is trained with human users to rate its responses. And that is one of the ways that it has gotten to the point where it can respond in a way that seems very human-like and that people enjoy. And so it will prefer answers that skew that way, meaning it will provide you an answer in a confident tone because that's what we want, even if the answer is incorrect. And you'll see this happen a lot where you'll ask it for something like words that begin with T, and it'll give you a bunch of words and they don't begin with T, and you'll go, hey, those words don't begin with T, and it'll go, oh, I'm sorry, you're right. And then it'll try it again, and then maybe it'll fail again. Or sometimes you can even have it give you the correct answer, and if you tell it it's wrong, it'll go, oh yeah, you're right, I'm wrong, and it'll provide you a different answer. So the way it's trained you can sort of fudge it a little bit, because it's only as good as that sort of push that it gets from us and the developers. So like there are different edge cases where it can be manipulated, and then like any other tool, there are ways that it does really well and things that it does really poorly, depending on its training data. Things like words that begin with T go back to things like what Ben was talking about. It's got 3 billion words, but it doesn't know letters. It knows words, which is one of the reasons it has trouble with things like that. It doesn't relate letters as well together because it's been trained on whole words. So dividing up a whole word into series of letters is trickier for it to do in its model.
How much does it understand the concept of the letter T? Not much, because that's not what it was trained to do.
We should ask it.
Hey, ChatGPT, do you know what T is?
Didn't think so, loser. This is related to what Sean was saying in like the algorithm and how it's been set up. And because it was created by humans, it has all of our human biases. So this has been a really hot button topic, but like tones of racism or sexism, that's embedded into the program because that's embedded into us as humans. So you kind of have to be careful and discerning with the answers that it churns out, and then review them, take out any of those kind of subliminal or very straightforward messages.
No, you're absolutely right, Addie. One of the big issues with ChatGPT 3, or I shouldn't say issues, one of the big criticisms was the fact that it wasn't great with handling human issues with care. ChatGPT 3.5 was only trained on 1.3 billion parameters opposed to the 175 billion parameters of 3. Because they've reallocated their sources to focus on human values and reinforcement learning for human preferences to improve its algorithms so that people would like it better, which I think goes back to what Sean was saying as well. It's the idea of making it sound right. And I think that's the interesting thing too about chatbots like this is that they're language processing machines. They're made to create sentences that sound like language, and it's based off of data that's fed into it. So it's good at learning the pattern of language, but it is not interpreting that language. It is not analyzing it. It is not checking it. It cannot cite sources. It can summarize it. It can do your book report for you, but it cannot cite the sources, and you're probably going to get in trouble with your teacher if you do that, you know?
That's
yeah,
really
it totally sounds like an 8th grade book report, doesn't it? It's like I'm trying to sound smarter than I am when I'm describing a book that I haven't read. There we go. AI. We nailed it. Way to go.
Done.
There are a lot of limitations here, and I kind of want to go over them real quick so then we can get into more about how we use them in our job. But obviously, yes, there's the carrying of bias. So it can't really consider ideas and interpret them for themselves, or concepts like sarcasm or tone or irony. It knows words, and it knows pieces of words that it can piece together and create tone in kind of a backwards, roundabout kind of way, but it doesn't really understand what it's doing. And so you have to do it for it. And it's also worth noting that ChatGPT 3.5 had its last knowledge update in January of 2022, which is 2 years ago now. And so Ken had a really great quote from his article, which was about if you ask it what team Tom Brady plays for, it could give you 3 different answers, or it could tell you he's retired, and there's no way it won't know. It can't know because it's based off of old data. But with that in mind, how might we use these strengths while also being aware of their weaknesses in marketing? How might it affect jobs like ours and related creative fields?
Yeah, it's gonna affect all fields. I'll speak to like how I use it and how I see it being used in what I do. I use it a lot for creating outlines for things I need to write. I'm not a strong writer, and it takes me a while to get started. So having it remove sort of that blank page effect and being like, I need a podcast outline about X, and it can very quickly give me one that I can then make into something that I want, and I don't have to just stare at a blank page, is very, very helpful. The other thing that it's really good at is code. Being a web developer, you can ask it for just about any type of code that you want for websites, for apps, and it will give you workable, executable code. Which probably to no surprise that the machine is good at writing code, but it can be very helpful. So people who are wanting to, dabble in that sort of thing, it can be a great jumping off point. Again, with a lot of these things, you do need sort of a background in some of it to make it work. You still need to know how to put the web page onto a server to make it work, and it can provide you those instructions. But like, there's still those steps that you have to take. But it can give you a lot of good feedback on stuff like that.
I think Julie and Addie and I could also talk about how we think it'll affect things like content writing and content creation as it involves our job. I think there have been moments where people act like chatbots like ChatGPT could replace our jobs, but I think based on the weaknesses we talked about, I don't think that would be in companies' best interest. Definitely not at this point of time. And I'm curious what y'all think about that.
I wrote down a quote in preparation for this episode. It is not mine. AI makes it easier to create mediocrity at scale. And I think that is so true. Like, it can give you a starting point. And that's kind of how I use ChatGPT when I use it. I don't always, but if I just need a starting point, like Sean said, everyone has that blank page. I'm totally frozen, writer's block, and that can just get creative juices flowing. And so that's how I tend to use ChatGPT. But because of the errors and the issues with tone that we've talked about, I always want to have my brain on the case, adding to, adjusting, reworking, because I'm better. I'm better than AI. And that's just the way it is.
Totally agree with everything Julie said. And that's the same way that I use it as well, as kind of a first draft situation. And it's also important to have an actual person reading through it and critiquing and editing, because the tone will vary for different clients and different placements, and ChatGPT doesn't always nail that. So, for instance, if you're writing for a large ad company or a quirky marketing company, those are going to be very different voices and tones depending on, is it a TV commercial? Is it a Facebook ad? Is it a YouTube ad? Like all of those different things matter, and having the background knowledge of those clients as a human being that, shifts and molds things a lot better than just ChatGPT on its own can.
It's a great reminder. If you're out there thinking, should I try this for my job? Should I use it for my job? Yeah, use it as a starting point and then put your brain behind what it turns out for you.
I just wanted to add that as of right now, ChatGPT is not funny. It can get close or, at times actually get to something that's funny, but for the most part, it's not very funny. And that's probably another weakness. So if you're not looking for it to write something very formal, we know we talked about all its problems with tone, but funny is one that it's sort of way off on right now.
Yeah. I was going to say, yeah, like in terms of like the decisions that we have to make in terms of like tone and execution for even something that is like chiller and more fun, like it's a more easygoing kind of client relationship. The quality, there's a level of quality you have to meet. And I think you can make things in here and churn it out and share it with your friends and it's fine. But to put it on a campaign for a client that's paying for it, it feels disrespectful. So like no shade to the people who make programs like this. It's just not where the technology is at. In an article for martech.com, Chris Shermer says the following about ChatGPT. I don't think it will replace us as marketers, strategists, planners, or creatives in the immediate future. That will be Terminator 2. No, my crisis comes from thinking it will cause most people, executives, clients, and managers to think it can replace us. So my question, before we get kind of into the wrapping up of the podcast part, is how do we go about responsibly acknowledging and addressing the growing use of AI models in our field, as well as the people who it's going to affect?
I think the biggest part is just transparency. So not lying or just never talking about it and saying, oh, no, like I would never, I'm a purist. I just write everything from scratch, which is great sometimes. But as we've talked about, sometimes you just need to get started something on that blank page. So just not having it be a taboo topic, like saying in a kickoff meeting or while you're working on a campaign, okay, in tandem with ChatGPT, we created X, Y, or Z, or using ChatGPT as a starting point, here's what we've developed using our expertise. And yeah, just making it more normal, I guess, and not keeping it in the shadows.
Yeah, I think it's an education process of using it, not being afraid of it, and actually learning what its strengths and limitations are, and not shying away from it, paying attention to, because it's changing very quickly and new things are happening all the time. So trying to sort of keep on top of it like you would any other sort of professional development, I think is important. And then also stuff like this has been around as well. Like this is in the news, but there's always been website builders and content generation farms that different companies have signed up for in the past. So this is a different version of that. And companies that want personal and quality marketing will always go to a human, at least until the stuff gets like way better. So I think that, it's going to be a lot of the startups and small businesses who might be able to use this when it's cheaper, but for people who are going to want quality, it's still with human creatives.
And I would add, Well, a couple of things. First off is for me, integrity. And I know this is something that we're seeing battled out in the courts in various stages, but like using AI for journalism, that's been pretty visible. Like, is that, you know, is that a show of integrity? I would say not. I think there's an aspect of due diligence. You know, we talked about errors. Is what you're putting out there accurate, correct? I think Addie, we had talked about this a while back, and you said because I kind of think if you rip something entirely from ChatGPT that it's plagiarism, but technically it's not because another entity didn't create it. Like it's not from someone's brain; it's an amalgam of inputs. But still, like I personally wouldn't feel great being like, "Yeah, just rip this out. Here you go." And then I would say to the point of, the danger being of people thinking it can replace us, and our responsibility as individuals is to keep the joy and creativity in our own work. Because if we say what AI generates is good enough, and I'm going to lower my standards to that, and you're not putting out compelling information or information in a compelling way, that's on you. A lot of nodding heads here, people. I've made a great point. So
Yeah, maybe we can get some applause in there for Julie.
Insert applause.
And the crowd goes wild.
That's 3 applauses for Julie. Yeah.
Julie.
Julie. I think that's a great note to end on. Let's pivot into the end of the podcast and do some M.O.L.L.Y jokes. And note, for the sake of transparency, M.O.L.L.Y did not actually write these jokes this time. She generated them using ChatGPT, but I will also be transparent. I punched them up a bit because, like Sean said earlier, ChatGPT is not always very funny. So
I kind of want to do an acronym for M.O.L.L.Y, like machine optimization of laughter and lightness, and then I'm lost on a why.
Just yelling. Yes, that acronym for M.O.L.L.Y, I could not repeat it if I tried. She generated some ChatGPT jokes, and here they are. This one's not really a call and response. It's kind of just a through. I told my mother she should embrace her mistakes, so she gave me a hug.
Oh, nice.
That's
a burn.
funny.
That's a burn.
Yeah. Just a little punching there. That was mostly their joke. So credit where credit is due.
Solid 8
I
for
know.
ChatGPT on
Right?
that one, I think.
Yeah.
Agree. I like an 8.
Number 2, why do chicken coops only have 2 doors? Because if they had 4, they'd be a chicken sedan.
I guess.
Nice.
Yeah.
No,
We started off really high that I
know.
think we can only go down from here.
It's
I'm going to
hard.
say like a 5 on
Yeah,
that.
I wanted to not
6.
like it, but it's fine. Yeah, it's a 5 or 6.
It
Yeah.
feels
It's
like
clever.
a real person
It's-
joke.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like a dad would say it, and I'd be like, he came up with that on his own.
Mhm.
Nice. Good for him.
Totally.
I feel like that was shame on me for not seeing it coming.
Mhm.
That's how I feel less than after that joke.
Don't, Julie. You're great. You have 3 applauses on you in this podcast, so you're doing great. And then this is the last one. This is my personal favorite. I'll see what y'all think. This one has the most punching up, so just keep that in mind. What's a robot's favorite genre of music?
Techno.
You'd think it's techno, but it's actually heavy metal.
Well done.
Oh, very good. I'm going to say 7 because I loved the first one so much that I can't go past
Right.
an 8, but very good.
I'll take it.
Yeah. That one had the little twist where it was like, oh, you think you know what the answer is, but
Yep.
you don't.
I was ready.
Now, did you actually have you think it's techno in your?
No, there were 2 different versions of it, and one was techno and one was heavy metal, and I combined them to make it, I thought, a more compelling joke.
Yeah, because I thought you would think it's techno was part of the joke, and
Yes.
that was just you in real time punching it up.
Mhm.
So
Wow.
kudos to
And-
you. See, I think that was a good example of like using ChatGPT. You get it, you make it better, and then in person, like a robot couldn't have done that.
No.
No, you're
Robots
better
are great at
than
improvising.
better than a robot.
And I've always said that.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Almost Productive. Before we go, we'd like to give a shout out to our producers, Nick and Molly, who work behind the scenes to make this podcast possible. If you'd like to learn more about what we do at New Boston Creative Group, you can reach us at newbostoncreative.com. You can also follow us on social media at New Boston Creative on Instagram and New Boston Creative Group on Facebook and LinkedIn. If you like this episode, please like, follow, subscribe, leave a review, and share the podcast with your friends. And if you didn't like the show, feel free to recommend us to your enemies. Tune in next time for some more office shenanigans, thoughts on trending topics, and marketing adjacent insights. Until next time, we hope you have a productive day. And that's the end of the episode.
Bye.
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 We're digitally waving, and I'm not automating it. I'm doing it myself.
Oh.